Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for your patience again. I'm Camille Thurman, and I play the saxophone, and I'm a vocalist. And this is the first launching of the Haven Hang, a place for young musicians and young women to come together and voice their questions and get advice and all kinds of great stuff. I'll do my best to share as much information and advice as I can. And I look forward to diving into these questions. Real quick, the reason why I wanted to launch this platform was because I found myself touring as a musician and encountering a lot of young women musicians that would come and ask me questions, primarily young women in high school and college and middle school. And the same questions that they would ask me were the questions that I had when I was their age, except I didn't have anybody really to go to that was a woman and a musician at that time. So I thought, you know what, if a lot of women are having the same questions, why don't we create a platform where we can connect, come together, and also hook up with older women musicians or big sister musicians and get a chance to have the dialogue happening and hopefully give you some help and some aid along this journey. Because I know this journey can seem kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, but hopefully this will be helpful to you. Okay, first question. Whoa. Okay, Minnie, she comes from Melbourne, Australia. Hey, Minnie. Could you talk us through your musical journey and how you started as a musician? Okay, well, initially I started out on a flute at the age of 12, and I went to the saxophone by accident, actually. I had a mouthpiece that my mother had given me. She was a school teacher, and she would always confiscate stuff like yo-yos and all kinds of toys. And one day she confiscated a mouthpiece. I don't know how she did that. And she was like, well, here, Camille, figure it out, take it to your school teacher and see what you could do with it. And I was like, all right, cool. I went to my band teacher and I thought that it was a clarinet mouthpiece because I just wanted to play clarinet. And it ended up actually being a saxophone mouthpiece. And my band teacher told me, you know, if you play flute and play saxophone and play clarinet, you can work on Broadway. And for me, I was like, I want to work on Broadway. That's what I want to do. So I was like 12 years old, bent on getting on Broadway. And that started the journey. Of course, I had an interesting journey because I ended up going to a performing arts high school, and then I ended up going to college for geological sciences. I just like rocks and dirt. So I ended up doing that. And then after I got out of college, it wasn't until actually my junior year of college, I met Tia Fuller, who was the first woman I ever met in person that played saxophone and sounded amazing. And for me, I had spent a good 10, 15 years of, actually no, a good 10 years at that time of playing, and I hadn't encountered not one woman who played an instrument. And for me, it just opened my eyes, literally seeing it in flesh and hearing it with my own ears. And she inspired me to make the choice and make the journey. And my junior year, I told my parents, hey, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to give you my degree and finish out my last year. And after this, I'm going to be a musician. Of course, my parents are mortified because they're both educators. So they were telling all their friends, like, oh, you know, she's going to be a musician. Oh, you know, no, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. She should be teaching. And I persevered through it, and I found a lot of mentors that were very helpful to me in the journey. And I practiced. I studied as much as I could. I listened to as much music as I could. And eventually I got better, and I ended up trying to play with as many people as I could. And I just grew. My career grew, and I was able to one day end up performing with people like Diane Reeves, Wynton Marsalis, and so many other people, and also perform in my own band. So that's how I started. That's the quick version. Okay, next question. This is an anonymous person, that goes by she, and she's from Lagos, Nigeria. And her question is, I'm a beginner jazz musician, and I must confess I'm completely overwhelmed by the wealth of information out there. I don't even know where to start from. So my question is this: what do I need to start up as a jazz beginner? How do I narrow down all the loads of material to what essentially I need right now for proper growth? That's an excellent question. I would say the first thing you want to do, if you're beginning just your instrument, you want to set up a great routine and a good foundation, because that's what's going to carry you through the rest of your journey. You got to have great technique, you got to have great sound, you have to have the ability to read, of course, music, and you got to have some inspiration too. You can't just play this instrument and not listen to people that play it. So I would suggest take all the advice, of course, that people are giving you, write it down in a notebook. I actually used to do this. I had a little, I see Whitney. I had a little notebook. Let's see, it's not in here, but it was literally like this size. And in the beginning of my journey, I would just jot down if musicians had a quote, or if I heard some information that I thought was really, really essential and I didn't want to forget it, I would write it down. And then I'd close it, put it away. And then for myself, when it came time to practicing, I had a routine, which this is essential in the beginning. Long tones. You want to make sure that you spend time, at least 20, 30 minutes a day, making sure that you're getting a good embouchure workout, and you're working on your breathing, and you're also working on your sound, because the sound is what's going to carry you. You can play 50 million notes, but if you don't have good sound, it's not worth anything. So making sure that you do your long tones every day will help you build a good embouchure, practicing good posture, and of course, good breathing technique. You want to spend at least 20 to 30 minutes on your scales and arpeggios. Why? Because they're the building blocks of everything. Whether it's classical music or jazz, you gotta be able to get around your instrument, and it helps you develop your technique. And then I would spend maybe 20, 30 minutes working out of a book for saxophone, class A, or any kind of literature or material that's meant for my instrument. If you're a vocalist, I'm sure there's a literature you could check out for trumpet. You have the Arbin's book. Trombones, the same thing for drummers. You have a book of rudiments. It's essential that you make that part of your daily practice, because it's going to help you apply the stuff that you're learning from the scales and the arpeggios, because then you're going to have little exercises that incorporate these things, and you'll develop your muscle memory and being able to execute those exercises. And then, of course, 20, 30 minutes. If you're a little bit more advanced, I would say spend 20, 30 minutes listening to some music that inspires you. For me, when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, I loved Dexter Gordon. So in my headset, I always was playing some Dexter, and I would pick one song that I'd want to learn and try to transcribe it. And the thing about transcribing, you don't have to do the whole thing in one shot. Just start with the chorus. In my case, it was rhythm changes. So I just took that one chorus, and it took me about a month or two to crack at it. But eventually I was able to get it under my fingers, where I was able to play it and listen with the recording. And then, of course, have a section in your practice session where you just listen for the love of listening. Listen to the sound, listen to the phrasing of the melody, listen to the exchange between the rhythm section and the horn player. Or if there is no horn player, the exchange amongst the rhythm section players. Try to teach yourself how to listen to music. Because sometimes when we're listening, we just listen to, oh, it sounds good, it's great, yeah. But really challenge yourself. Listen to what the bass is doing and how it relates with the pianist, or the drummer and how that relates with the bassist. If you're a horn player, listen to the exchange between what the horn player is playing in the context of how the rhythm section is supporting them. And you don't have to necessarily go into listening to giant steps today. Start with something simple. Start with the blues. For me, my favorite blues that I love to check out is John Coltrane's slow blues. because the melody is super simple and it's repetitive. But then at the same time, the solo that he takes on that particular track, it just develops and develops and develops, chorus after chorus, off of one little phrase that he starts off with in his first chorus. So that's another thing. But that's like what, 4 different things in your practice routine. Just start simple. You don't have to practice for 10 hours a day. What's really important is making sure that your practice session is organized and is consistent, and that you give yourself a chance to slowly work out the kinks. So when you're working on those scales, whether you're a beginner or you're advanced, if you're trying to work on your technique, start it off at a tempo where you're able to do everything even and consistent. And then take it up a couple of clicks. Once you do everything for the entire horn, so all 12 keys, then all right, kick it up a notch to maybe another 2, 3, or 5 clicks. And you'll see day after day, it'll get better, so that within a week or 2, voila, it's better. And you're able to do it a little faster. And the same thing, of course, for long tones. Go a little longer each time. I don't have my horn with me right now, but one little exercise that I do for long tones, I hold it out. I go chromatically. So I might go from a B flat to A. So da, da, rest, 2, 3, 4. La, da, rest, 2, 3, 4, and go all the way down, go all the way up. And the most important thing you want to do is make sure there's consistency in your sound. So whether you're in the basement of your instrument or in the upper area of your instrument, you want the sound to be the consistent same fullness within the middle as it should be in the top and the bottom. That was a lot. Sorry, but I hope that answers your question. Okay, next question. We got a lot of questions. I'm gonna do my best to get through these for the hour. I know we only have an hour together, but if there's some questions that I don't get to answer, I promise you, we'll find a way to get it in. Maybe not today, but later on. Okay. The next question is from Whitney. How do you teach a horn player to play fills when accompanying a vocalist? That's a good question. In order to do that, you got to listen to the source. My favorite is Etta Jones and Houston Person. Houston Person, he's amazing, and he's the sweetest guy in the entire world. If you ever get to meet him or see him in person, go see him play. And I love him because he had a way of playing with Etta so that even though he was playing fills behind her, it never got in the way. And that's the tricky thing about playing an accompaniment situation, whether you're a pianist accompanying a vocalist or a horn player accompanying a vocalist. You gotta know how to deal with space, because if you're in that vocalist space too much, it's gonna create friction and conflict. So it's a combination of listening, but anticipating, but then at the same time stepping back and being able to see the big picture of what's happening and going on with the dynamic. Like sometimes for me, if I'm playing with a vocalist, I will listen to the vocalist and see how he or she is phrasing. But then also every now and then I'll look at the pianist. You know why? Because when it comes to a quintet setting where you got the vocalist up front, pianist is the second in command because he or she is keeping the rhythm section together. In most cases, they're the musical director or whatnot. But the horn player and the pianist, they kind of fill similar roles where they kind of ad-lib or fill in or tailgate in some people call. So it's an art. You got to be able to balance looking and seeing what's happening before you make that move, and at the same time stepping back and being able to listen and see what's necessary and needed. And what's also important is being able to understand sometimes just because you can do it, it doesn't necessarily mean the situation's calling for it. So having that reserve to be able to say, you know what, this particular moment, I'm not going to play that because it's not calling for it. And let me just sit back and listen and then be able to jump in when it's necessary. I would highly, highly suggest if you want to learn how to do that, check out Houston Person, check out John Coltrane, There's a record that he did with Johnny Hartman. It's beautiful. And he masterfully does that. And there's a whole lot of other great musicians that you could check out. You could shoot me a message and I could try to give you some recommendations. Okay, next question. This comes from Devin, who's a bassist and a vocalist. Yeah. Okay, we met at your residency for Berklee's Institute for Jazz and Gender Justice. Yeah, that's right. I find that as a female non-binary musician, there is a tendency to be so critical, self-critical. This feeling that we must be everything in order to represent all women. How do you deal with that urge to be overly critical while at the same time being honest with yourself, pushing as hard as you can to improve and to grow? That's an excellent question. And I can say probably for myself and a lot of musicians just in general, men and women, we feel the same way. It's just, we might not say it publicly, but a lot of us feel the same way. Dealing with your first part of the question, you have to, you gotta find a way to build your confidence. And I'm not saying that as in, oh, you're not confident, no, but in being a musician and also in being a young lady, sometimes we'll encounter situations where we have to really trust and rely on the skill that we spent our time perfecting and practicing and shaping. And when you get into those moments, you got to find a way to fight or resist those urges to kind of beat yourself down. I dealt a lot with this in my early teens. I went to a performing arts high school, and there were a lot of guys, and there were about maybe 3 or 4 young women. And then when it came to joining the all-city jazz band, I was the only girl. So I dealt with that a lot. I was dealing with guys that were playing for 6, 7, 8 years, and I was only playing the tenor for 3. And I didn't tell anybody anything. And I dealt with situations where I was literally told into my face, why are you here? You don't belong here. And I had to find a way in myself to ignore that. In that situation, I was being told. It wasn't based on what I was feeling. It was what I was told. But whether you're feeling those feelings or you're being told those things, you got to find the space in your development to literally just believe in yourself. That's why you practice. You practice so that you could be the best that you can be, so that you can know your instrument as much as you can, okay? Because that's the only thing that's going to save you when you're on that stage. Because when you get on in that situation where you're playing, it doesn't matter who's around you. It doesn't matter what anybody's saying to you. You're just in your zone. You're in your world and you're playing because you enjoy it. You remember and realize the reason why you love playing. So that when you're in that moment, everything else doesn't matter because you're trying to focus on playing. And that's where it comes to asking yourself, why do you want to play? Do you play because you love it? Or do you play because you really care about what people are thinking? And that's, sometimes we got to have those conversations with ourselves often, especially, you know, when you're getting nervous. Like I never forget, I was on a tour, and sometimes when you're on the road, you don't have time to practice. And you got to find time to practice. And sometimes the situation is so that you're moving around so much, you literally aren't sitting still, and you might not even have access to your instrument. And for a second, I was like, oh man, I feel terrible. I feel horrible. I haven't touched my horn in God knows how long. And I feel like, how am I going to get out there and play? And one of my big brother mentors, he told me, he was like, look at me. You're here for a reason, because you can play. So just play. Don't worry about anything else. You spend all the time in practicing and knowing your instrument. You love this music. Get out there and tell your story. So what anybody else thinks? What matters is, are you having fun? Did you enjoy yourself? And that's it. You don't have to play to please anybody. You don't have to play to prove anything to anybody. You play because you love it. And when you go out there, that's what you do. And that was the best advice he gave me, because I was able to shake it off and just go out there and play. So every time now I get on the stage, it's like, I don't care what anybody else is thinking of saying. I'm going to go out there and play, because that's the most important thing. That's my space. That's where I get to be free. That's where I get to be me. So I'm not going to allow anything or anyone or any other thoughts get into that space except my own, which is time for me to be one with my instrument and share that gift with the world. I hope that answered your question. Oh, the second part, how do you deal with the urge of being overly critical, but being honest? Get mentors. You gotta have mentors. If you're gonna be a musician, guy or girl, you have to have mentors. For me, I was fortunate to have a village of mentors. It didn't come until much later in my life. I was in my 20s, but it's okay. They saved me at the right time, thank goodness. Mentors, they show you about yourself. They let you know, hey, sweetie, you need to work on these rudiments because that's going to help you be able to get through these technical passages. Or honey, you need to work on your sound. Do some long tones because that's going to help you develop a sound that have presence, not necessarily loudness, but presence. Or they can guide you in situations where if you're having these thoughts, but you're not having a space to converse with somebody about it, talk with them. Because many times they've been there and done it. I'll never forget, I was on the road with a wonderful pianist who's one of my mentors by the name of Bertha Hope. And she was married to the great Elmo Hope, who was a bebop pianist and just incredible. And she told me a story one time. I remember I was driving and I was voicing to her I was frustrated and dealing with some things. And I was just trying to figure it out. And she was quiet. And then she spoke. And she told me this story about Elmo. And she also told me the story about, oh my goodness, my brain went blank, about this pianist who was a really, Bud Powell, and how Bud Powell at that time was dealing with a lot, okay? Personally, but also at the same time dealing with the career, the business, and you know, it was affecting him in a lot of different ways. And the story that she told me, I'm not going to go into specifics, but after she told me that story, it made me pick my head up and say, okay, I could do this. And if it wasn't for her giving me those words of wisdom, I probably would have still been rambling and quit and I wouldn't be here today. But that's why it's important to have mentors. They guide you. They give you advice when you need it the most. They help you in making decisions. They help you not just in playing, but sometimes in life, which actually helps the playing too. So get mentors. If you're not sure, if you're feeling great about what you're doing and what you're working on, check with them. And mentors don't always necessarily have to play the same instrument as you or be in the same field. I have mentors that are vocalists. I have mentors that are choreographers. I have mentors that are men. I have mentors that are women. So find people that believe in you, that love what you're doing and support you 1,000% because they're going to tell you the truth. And when you do have those feelings where you're being overly critical, they'll let you know too. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to one of my mentors and I sent him a little video that I was working on playing for some stuff. And I said, man, I'm not happy with the way I was playing. I was trying to go. And he was like, it's fine. What are you talking about? Stop being so overly critical. And I had to step back and I was like, you know, I'm doing the same thing that I did when I was 13, 14 years old. Stop it. Love yourself. Love what you're doing. Love the process of learning. Love the process of developing and love the process of getting to know your instrument. Because especially in the society, sometimes for women, we're taught to give ourselves, give, but not have something for ourselves. And when you're playing your instrument, you're pouring into yourself. You're investing into yourself. You're getting to know yourself. So don't allow that negative thought or thinking or energy or overcriticalness affect that, because it's like a plant. If you smash a plant, it's not going to grow. But if you give it some water, if you give it some sunlight, if you give it some love, if you talk to it, it'll grow. It's the same thing with your artistry when you're developing it. Be gentle, but also be honest too. Sometimes when you do have to go and practice, yeah, you need to go and practice. Get in that room and do what you have to do. But be honest, be open, and just enjoy the process. And when in doubt, go talk to a mentor. Okay, Next question. This comes from Destiny from New Jersey, and she plays bass. How do you overcome sexism in college settings when you have to be with these adults for 4 years, even in a situation where administration does nothing about it? That's a serious question. And I'm not surprised to see this question because I've encountered it personally, and I've also talked with other young women who have encountered this as well. And what I can say, first and foremost, this is where we have to have a strong relationship between educators and students, because when we're talking about sexism, and it's not just necessarily in the band setting, this is just in general in the world, it comes down to figuring out how can we work together as a community to break down systems that hold certain people back and allow make a situation where we can have equity and we can have a balanced playing field. And a lot of times, just for young women, how can I say it? It starts as early as even when you're picking your instrument, the types of instruments that you pick. And it's critical for educators, band teachers, and mentors to really instill in children at an early age, boys and girls, that instruments don't have genders, that it's possible to see and to hear people that look like you and you and you and you and you all on these different instruments, and that these are the possibilities out here that exist and that you can one day do it too. It also starts with the support. So when we're having situations where, I'm just going to throw an example, say for instance, there's a saxophone section and there's 6 people, but you can only have 5, but there's only 5 playing at a time. And if that 6th person is a girl and she's not being able to play at all because the saxophonists are deciding who plays on what, we need to have a conduit where the teacher or the educator can talk with the children and make sure, hey, listen, this is a classroom where everybody has the equal opportunity to learn. So if we're going to have equal opportunity to learn, let's set this up so that this is actually going to be the case. Now, if it's not happening, that's when the educator has to step in and say, listen, this is what the law is going to be. And there's going to be repercussions if you're breaking the rules. The one thing I would suggest in this situation where you're dealing with being an adult in college, see if there's a way, first off, if you can talk with amongst if there's other women musicians, see if you can come together and befriend each other and create a pact. So that way you can come together as a group and talk to the administrator or to talk to the band instructor. If that doesn't work, then you need to find a way of documenting whatever's happening, but then also make sure that you have allies. If you have male musicians that are friends that are witnessing it and they're saying, hey, that's wrong. No, that shouldn't be. Hey, why are you doing this? It's important for your male peers and friends to step in and say, hey, this is unacceptable. This is not tolerated here. And if it comes to the place where if the teacher's not doing anything with it, then the guys and the ladies that have formed an alliance should come together and go to the next step and say, hey, we have a problem, okay? And present it. I personally I know about this firsthand because I was in a program where there's only 4 girls and there are about 15, 18 guys. And my particular situation, we had about 7 saxophonists, but we could only have 5 at a time. And the school had made a transition because the first teacher that was there for my first 2 years, he had left and they were in transition with another teacher. And the teacher that was the transition teacher, he was trying to get a hold of the band, which educators, you know how that is when things switch. But then at the same time, he was trying to move as business as usual because he got a concert. And unfortunately for us students, he left it to us to decide, well, you decide who plays on what. I'm just going to conduct the band. And we kind of looked at each other like, that's not going to work in this situation because we know what's going to happen. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Myself and the other young lady, we literally spent the majority of the period sitting there watching the band rehearse while the guys played. And some of the guys that weren't too nice to us, they said, oh, you know, I don't feel like playing on this tune. You play. And it's the last 5 minutes, and we found ourselves having to learn double the music for both books. And we didn't know whether or not we were going to play, which tune we were going to be playing on, or if it was going to be switching. So it kind of was not fair because they could play on whatever they wanted to, but we always have to be prepared to play everything, which of course you should be. But in this situation, it wasn't balanced. And of course, we went and told our teacher, and he was like, oh, you know, guys are just, you know, they're being guys, and, you know, it's okay, it's going to work out. I'll talk to the guys. Guys, you're being mean. Don't do that. Nothing happened. So fortunately, we had a few guy friends that saw what was happening, and they vouched for us. And we went to the next administration level, the next teacher, and we told him about it. He kind of had a little conversation with them, and nothing happened. It got to the point where we had to go to the next level, which was administration. And she couldn't really do anything because at the time she said, look, there's no sexual abuse, there's no verbal abuse, it's out of the hands. And this was about maybe 15, 18 years ago. The only thing that made change happen was when the student, he posted something with our names online. This is like early social media. And she had something documented and was like, okay, and they suspended the student, but this took 2 years. And by the time of the 2 years being up, we were all fed up and we were like, we don't want to play. For me, I actually quit because I was done. I was like, I don't want to play ever again. And it broke my spirit, just the process of dealing with it. So I would suggest if you're dealing with this, try to come together with your friends, guys and ladies. Try to find a way to talk with your instructor. And if nothing is happening, if you have to go to the next level, go to the next level. And if you have particular instances, try to make sure that you notate, like if a guy stole your horn and whatever, because actually did happen, not to me, but somebody else. That was a mouthpiece. But if something happens, just, make a mental note, or, just make a note of it and just say, okay, all right, keep it in your record so that when you finally get to a place where you can get to talk to somebody that can deal with the situation, then you have it documented. Because that was the other thing too, for us young ladies, we were 15, 16 years old, and all these things that were being said to us, it was like, well, who could vouch for us? Only our friends that were there. So just try to find a way to get help from your mentors, from your teachers, talk with them, and of course your peers. I hope that answers your question. Okay, this question is from Emily, and she's a trumpeter and vocalist. And this actually ties in with Devin's question. Okay. The dynamic of being a singer and an instrumentalist and choosing to play or to sing. That's a good question. I didn't start singing until I was in my 20s. And the reason why I didn't start singing until much later was because I kept it a secret. I felt when I was about 13, 14, I remember carrying my instrument, and people would always be like, can you play? Can you really play? Pull it out. Show me right now. I want to see if you can play. And I'd just be standing there with my instrument like, no, I don't have to do anything for you. And I remember I went to an award ceremony and I was about 18, and I had just played and I had just sang, And it was an older gentleman. He came to me. He was like, "You should just sing. You shouldn't play." And I remember sitting there just feeling like, okay. And for me, I guess in the development, it seemed as, well, if you play, I made a connection. If you play an instrument, society questions you if you could really play before you can even do anything. That's not fair. But then this guy, he's not even questioning me. He's telling me to sing because I guess maybe he sees more women singing than playing. And for the longest time, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to play my horn because I want to be the best that I can be and prove that you could play an instrument and be amazing. And that's what I did. I kept the singing a secret for about maybe 8 years. And I just focused on playing. Would I tell myself that, had I known and went through what I went through today, then to myself today, back then, to my 14, 15-year-old self, I would have just told her to sing and play. And here's why. It's your gift. If you are duly gifted, you're blessed. And if you have one gift, you're still blessed. Everybody has different forms of art, of talents, and how they tap into those talents, that's unique in itself too. For me, I can play and I can sing. It's actually a great thing to be able to play and sing because it helps you in learning your instrument. When you're singing your parts and when you're vocalizing those transcriptions, it helps you to get to your instrument, and vice versa. When you're playing it and you're teaching yourself to sing it, it helps you create a better, stronger connection with your ear, but then also with your fingers, and you get to see and visualize the music so that you have a real organic way of understanding it that nobody else can teach you because you've developed that way of learning. Everybody learns uniquely. Everybody has that right to learn however the way they choose to, that works for them. So I would say if you're a singer and a vocalist, develop both. Of course, learn how to master and develop both instruments. If you're going to sing, I would highly recommend taking some basic singing courses just to learn how to take care of your voice, the proper way of breathing, the proper way of singing, of course, your vowels and consonants and all that great stuff. And if you're a singer that happens to play an instrument, I would really, really, really stress for you to learn how to play the instrument for itself, because it's going to help you in understanding so many things. The harmony, the melody, form, chords. It's going to really make you that much more knowledgeable so that when you present the music, you're tapping into another level of understanding that's a little deeper, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Going back to Emily, how do you address the sexism that can be perpetuated by friends and elders you respect within the jazz community? Also, have you addressed internalized sexism, if there was any present in your growth? Well, when you're picking an instrument, sometimes as simple as that. I remember walking down the street with my trombone, because that was my very first instrument for 2 weeks, and I quit. And somebody asked me if I could play, and I was wearing my dress, and I was just kind of like, well, if any other kid was here, would you ask them that? And I felt kind of a little taken aback because it was like, well, how come you don't ask the guys that? Why are you asking me that? And you know, it's the thing where, again, you got to find mentors. If you don't know a person directly, you have access to their autobiographies, you have access to their music. And in this day and age, particularly now during quarantine, if there's a specific person that you love and admire that's still alive, shoot them an email, reach out to them, send them a message on Instagram or Facebook, or go to their website and see if you can leave a message in their DM. Reach out, ask a question, ask a good question that you took time to think about. Don't just ask them a little question of like, oh, what color you like? Think about it, research on them a little bit and ask them a good question. I would totally say in dealing with the internalized sexism, when you talk to mentors, sometimes they can give you some good advice on how to handle it. And then also they can share some information as to how to deal with it. I'll never forget, I was in a situation where I went to an award show. Well, it was an awards thing for musicians, and a person did something that was not called for, that was technically harassment. And when I came home, I was in such shock, but then at the same time, I was beating myself up because I was like, I should have screamed at the guy, but I didn't scream. But then at the same time, in my head, all these thoughts are racing, like, well, did I do the right thing? Or I should have did this. And I talked to my mentor that night, and he was like, look, Camille, you can't beat yourself up for, it wasn't your fault. He was wrong, and at the end of the day, it's not your fault. So don't guilt yourself, don't blame yourself. At the end of the day, what you can do is just take a second, sit back, and formulate how you're feeling and write them down. And then the next time, if there is a next time, which it better not be, but if there is, you have an understanding of how to access those thoughts that you were thinking. Because sometimes when something traumatic happens to you, you're in shock. Some people deal with shock, some people deal with being angry, some people deal with closing in. For me, I had just shut down. And he was so right in telling me to do that, because it helped me to be able to learn how to articulate my feelings, so that when I'm in situations of conflict, I know how to get over the fear, or get over the shock, and be able to get straight to, this was not called for. This made me feel uncomfortable. Okay. The other part of the question was, how do you address the sexism that can be perpetuated by friends and elders you respect in the jazz community? Again, it's important when you're dealing with the community, men and women have to work together, because think about it. If you're going to be a musician, you're going to make a career of this, we have to live with each other. We have to work together. And when there's a problem, or when there's something that is not right, we have to fix it as a community. So it comes down to us raising awareness and coming together, yes, and being a team, and being able to voice what our issues are and work actively together on how to break down those systems that perpetuate sexism or gender discrimination. Yeah, that's the best way I can answer it right now. I hope that works. Okay, this next question is from Anonymous. How can you decipher whether you're not good enough, whether or not you are good enough, or you're not being chosen because you're not one of the guys? Sometimes I feel like I do the best I can and am satisfied with how I play next to others in the band, but do not get a call back. I know I played a great solo and hit every note right. Sometimes later I will see someone playing with the group as a sub who has not played the music at the level that I played, but is consistently getting called back. In these instances, it is hard to know the true reason to not being called back, and it's hard to be motivated to improve. You know what? This is one thing I had to learn. You can't think for people. Don't do it. You'll drive yourself crazy. You have to rest and rely on what you know. And that's why we practice. That's why we work on our craft. That's why we get better. That's why we get to the point where we know our instrument so well that we took the time to really play it, that we're able to execute and access it, so that when we are in those moments, nothing can speak for it except just for the horn itself. That's your talking card. That's your calling card. That's the best way to defy that. It's unfortunate that this kind of stuff happens, where you could be playing at a great level and you don't get called. But then also you got to think about it too. We're all human. I never forget, I did this audition for a band, and this was a band led by a woman. And it was a well-known artist, and she hired an all-female band. And I remember I sent the audition tape, and I was working with the musical director in another gig, and I was talking with the MD of this lady, and all my friends that were musicians in the band, they were like, hey, get Camille, she could do it. She totally can do it. She could learn by ear, and boom, bam, 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 boom. And I was thinking, okay, I think I actually got the gig. I didn't get the gig. And for a long time, I wondered, I was like, man, did I not get the gig because I couldn't play, or because I'm like, no, I could play? I mean, what did I do wrong? Is it the way I look? Is it how short I am? Is it how tall I am? And for a year, it really messed with me, because I was just like, man, how could, I mean, it's one thing you do it, okay, sometimes guys, you know, they got their, this happens sometimes with some guys, but this happened with a woman. I know I could play the part. And my best friend, one of my closest best friends, she said, look, sweetie, some gigs are the right fit for you, and some gigs aren't the right fit. And it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes in some situations, yeah, it might be you're not playing at the level to be able to handle the gig. But even if it's a situation where you're playing at a level, sometimes it might not be the right fit for you. They have a vision and doesn't fit. Let that be. Let them deal with it. If you're in a situation where you're playing really well and they're choosing not to call you for whatever reason, later for that. You focus on yourself. You become the best that you can be. You focusing on your craft and be so undeniably amazing on your instrument that they have to pull their hair out, okay? When they hear you, and make those musician faces like, when they hear you play. That's the one thing you can control. You can't control people's thoughts, but you can control how good you can be. That's my advice for that. Okay, this next question actually comes from an educator. Hi, Camille. Thanks so much for doing this session and for being a role model for women. Oh, thanks. I've taught my middle school band for over 30 years, and although I have always had more than half young women in my jazz bands and done everything in my power to encourage and build them up, once they disperse to several different high schools, fewer each year are in the jazz band. If it is half boys and girls in middle school, it becomes only a third or a quarter of women in high school, and then even less when it comes to college, university levels, like maybe one to three women in the big band. You think that it would have improved over 30 years, and maybe it has slightly, but it's still an issue. I do all I can at my level, but there are several dynamics that occur in high school where they participate less and less. Have you seen this dynamic elsewhere? If so, what do you think all those issues are? Well, it's a combination of things. Some of the stuff I addressed earlier, it starts when you start the instrument. Making sure that when children begin playing instruments, they are taught from a nurturing, judgment-free zone where it's safe to learn. And in teaching them these instruments, we're not, how can I say it? We're not teaching in a way where we're unintentionally pushing on constructs that society has geared. Okay, like, oh, the flute's for a girl, or oh, the trumpet's for the boy. We have to be conscious in our actions and also in the way we think and speak and communicate with each other, and how we're upholding certain practices and how we're also breaking down and reforming new practices that better society. And it leads all the way up through school. From middle school, it's the foundation. In high school, we need to have master classes, clinics, we need to see posters on the wall, we need to hear musicians of all gamuts, male and females, all cultures, all around the world. Part of what helps a student in developing and being a musician is being able to see and hear, because if they could see the person do it and they can hear the person do it, they can imagine and put themselves in that role and dream. If you don't see it and you don't hear it, how do you know it exists? So it's important at an early age that we're giving those visualizations, and we're hearing those sounds as young students so that we can understand this is the norm. Because a lot of times what happens is, by the time these musicians grow up, we might have 2 or 3 women that are playing. And then I witnessed it myself. I could be on the stand, you know, with the Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra, and there'll be one person in the audience. Where are all the other women? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And in my head, I'm thinking, look, if you only knew the journey that we had to go through just to get to the point of being able to play at that level. There's a whole process in between that doesn't get spoken of. And this is part of the reason why we're doing this today, to unearth those processes and figure out how we can get through the journey so that we can get to the point where we can be great musicians if we choose to be on our craft. So we gotta have mentors. We gotta have role models. We gotta have examples. But then we also have to work with educators and with students and with parents in creating an educational environment that's safe to learn. A lot of times, I can't speak for other women, but I know for me, from what I encountered, some of us, we were discouraged from taking solos in class publicly because we were scared of being laughed at, because we literally were being laughed at in our face or told you suck. So that's when it's really important for there to be a healthy and strong relationship between the educators and the students, because then it creates a sense of trust. And then when we're dealing with these issues, rather than Johnny, you shouldn't have done that, or Sally, you shouldn't have done that, we can get into a situation where, okay, we're having a conversation as a community. This is not working for our community. How can we fix this? Okay, so in this educational environment, in my community, in this classroom, in these four walls, everybody has a chance to take a solo. We are not laughing or judging at anybody. Everybody has the right to learn. This is a safe place to learn. I honestly didn't get that until I was in college. I was 20. Imagine if girls got that kind of environment at an early age, just from the beginning of their development. It would make a huge difference. And then of course, the support. I would say, some people, they say, oh, they always make it all about the girls. And it's like, well, we got to understand, when you have a system that's designed a certain way, that's keeping it from being level or have equity, we got to give a little extra nurturing, because a lot of times there's certain things that are set in place for some, but that's not for others. And in a lot of cases for young women, we start a little later with our instruments. I know for me, I didn't go to jam sessions at 15, 16 years old because my dad was like, you will not leave this house by yourself and go at midnight to see a jam session. So I didn't really get the jam session experience until I got out of college, and I was 23. Meanwhile, some of my friends who were guys, they were going out to see cats play, coming to school the next day. Man, I saw Larry Willis. Man, he was jamming at the Village Vanguard. This is like 17, 18 years old. And I'm like, I was staring at my walls last night. So we have to create a situation where we can allow young women to be able to learn or get into these environments. If it means bringing in guest artists so that they can see them, having community-based music educational programs where they get to have one-on-ones with artists that do what they do, play music, or even have a session where they can have workshops, or even go out and see these people perform. We need that. And then of course, high school, we got to continue that. And then in college, it's really critical that we keep that community going. And the more that I think about it, it's bigger than just, okay, this happens in high school. Okay, this happens in middle school. No, we got to get educators for the entire educational community to be connected. If you're going to be in if you're going to be in middle school, they need to see students maybe in high school playing their instruments. For me, I remember how powerful it was to see, I'll never forget, it was the first time I saw Lakeisha Benjamin and Caddy Rodriguez was at a high school concert that LaGuardia hosted. I was in 8th grade and they were, I believe, in 10th or 11th grade playing with the senior jazz band. I'd never seen that in my life before that day, okay? These are two women of color burning on an instrument. And I'm looking around like, they look like me. I've never seen that before. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for my band teacher dragging me from home to that concert that night, I would have never known, oh, wow, you could be a girl and you could play and you could be amazing. If it wasn't for me stumbling upon a CD of Virginia Mayhew, I would have never knew that, oh, wow, women play the tenor saxophone. So we got to have environments where we're giving these resources to these young women, but at the same time, we're consistently nurturing them so that way they can get to a place where, okay, you can play, you got your stuff together, you're at a level where you're able to handle this journey. If we don't do that, how do they have a chance? So educators got to work together. Of course, we have to create an opportunity for the next generation to connect with the elders so that way we can have these conversations often and not keep them in our head and be quiet for 10, 15, 20 years. We got to create that space where we can talk, that it's safe, that space where we can learn from one another. And then also at the same time, we got to create opportunities for young musicians to be able to play and work on their craft and be critiqued. And also at the same time, be encouraged by elder musicians and work to a point where, okay, we're building you up for this is where we want you to be as a musician in this community. And we're going to give you these opportunities to be able to build you up. That, I think, is, in my opinion, the best way of dealing with and managing this situation. I'm praying that it gets better, and it is a long journey. But I think as long as we're staying in conversation and we're actively making an effort to break down these walls and rebuild them and work together in rebuilding them, hopefully within the next 5 years, we'll have more women involved in the arts because they'll know it exists and that the possibility is there because they see it. Okay. Next question, Jenny from Winnipeg, Manitoba. What can educators do to better or different to ensure that all students feel engaged, empowered, and safe in the band room, specifically jazz? I said it before, judgment-free zone. This is a safe place to learn. It's a safe haven. So everybody has the right to learn, and instilling that in them very early and continuing that. It's okay to make a mistake. Ladies, I know sometimes we feel pressure like, oh my gosh, I'm the lady in the band. I cannot make a mistake. I need to be perfect. Don't do it. Don't carry that burden on you. Nobody's telling you to be perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody gets shy. Everybody screws up at one point. And it's okay. We're human. So we have a right to be human. There's no need to have to be, I have to be 10 times better. Well, yeah, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves, put some elbow grease on, dig in, and really work that sucker out and be the best you can. But if you're going to do it for you. Don't do it for everybody else or society. Do it because that's what you want to do. I want to be the best that I can be. So what does this require? Okay, I'm not going to the mall tonight to hang up my girls. I'm going to put some hours in shed and get this transcription. That's what it's about. Okay, Instagrammers, I see that we have like a minute left. If you want to go over to Facebook, we can continue this conversation. And if you want to find out more, just hit the like button and I'll let you know when we'll have more of this happening again. See you in Facebook. Okay, next question. Anonymous, how do we encourage young girls to stick with jazz from middle school to high school? Well, I kind of addressed that already. Willa is the next person from Colorado. What's one of your favorite stories from a gig you've played? Ha! Okay, my favorite story, I never forget, I was with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. We were doing a Christmas tour, and we were in Atlanta, Georgia. The concert hall was packed, and all I could think of was as soon as he played our last note, I gotta pack all the doubles. I gotta pack all the instruments. I'm running from the stage to downstairs in the basement where my trunk is with all my instruments. And I'm trying to make sure, okay, do I have the clarinet reeds? Do I have the barrel? Do I have the flute? Do I have the tenor? My brain is like going through a memory checklist of making sure I have everything. And I left my phone in my dressing room. So I'm running around doing all this. And I encounter one of the guys, and he's like, hey, Camille, we've been texting you like crazy. I'm like, I'm trying to pack all my instruments because we're going to the next city tomorrow and I don't want to leave anything. And he was like, Jimmy Heath is looking for you. I was like, what? And sure enough, I came downstairs. I stopped what I was doing. And Jimmy Heath was like, where is that girl with the saxophone? Where is that girl with the saxophone? I want to talk to the girl with the saxophone. And I was like, she's here. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, because for me, Jimmy Heath, he lived in Queens, and I'm from Queens, New York. And he's part of that jazz history that I read about and that I love and appreciate so much. And, you know, to me, I'm like, he's like one of the greatest saxophonists as part of this legacy. And the fact that he took the time to look for me, I couldn't put any perspective on it, because I was like, but you're Jimmy Heath. I should be looking for you. But it touched me so much, because it was just like, wow, he's a legend. And he actually took a part of his day to try to track me down, because he just wanted to meet me. And it was one of the best experiences. We ended up talking for like 10, 15 minutes. He told me stories about so many musicians and about the history of my neighborhood. And he gave me a huge hug, and he encouraged me and told me how he was proud. And that just warmed my heart so much. That's one of my best stories from a gig. How would you recommend getting into the professional jazz scene? Well, I would suggest, first off, get your stuff together, okay? Be able to master your instrument. Learn your tunes. Learn them in as many keys as you can, because you never know. You might get called to do a tune in a key you're not used to doing it in. Practice as many tempos as you can and master it fast and slow. Those in between, grown folks tempos, all those tempos, because you need to be able to be in a situation and activate your greatness. Be able to channel that in and be able to play and master it. I would also suggest sub as much as you can. When I first joined the city, I was subbing in as many rehearsals as possible with different big bands, but also playing in small groups too. It's good to have a well-rounded understanding of this music, because you're not just going to play one type of music for the rest of your life, unless you choose to. That's your business. And if you're going to be a freelance musician, particularly in New York City, you got to be able to handle what's thrown at you. And that's a muscle within itself that you have to develop. You can't just practice and memorize music and show up and deal with it. Because guess what? You might show up at the gig and you might be expected to do other things that you've never tried. And sometimes you might have to say yes, even though you never did it, just because, hey, it's the gig and you need to learn and get it together. I'm sure we've all have said yes at some point and figured it out and made it work. And oh, now I know how to do it. Of course, relationships. When I first started out, I had my mentors, and fortunately they recommended me to different musicians, and that's how I ended up creating my network. And from there it grew. When it comes to playing, it's not about this, it's about this. Let the horn speak for you, okay? That's the most important thing. And then also, of course, try to be seen as much as you can. Go to the sessions and play. If you're over the age, or if you got your mom and dad with you taking you to the session, play as much as you can. Even if it's in your hometown and there's a session that's like once a week or once a month, make it a goal every time you go. And don't just play like, oh, I'm just going to play, Green Dolphin Street with them. No, work out something at home. Try to work on your tunes and work on your concepts, so that when you get to that session, you're pushing yourself mentally to go beyond what you're used to doing. And be comfortable with being uncomfortable as part of the life. A lot of times you're going to have to play stuff you've never played before, or a tempo that maybe you never played before, or with people that you never played before. But you have to master being able to be comfortable with yourself to make every situation cool, if that makes sense. And of course, don't burn any bridges. Show up on time. Be nice to people. The community is very small. So if you have nothing to say that's positive, and keep it going. What would you recommend for practicing to become a better jazz musician? All those things I just said. Okay, and here's the final question that was given to me on the Zoom. This is the mother of a professional musician. I encourage high school age musicians to approach club owners, booking agents, clients directly. Wow. That's a skill. I teach them how to pitch the benefits of hiring the band, how to put on a professional quality show and advertise it, and then how to negotiate payment. I'm always there for backup, though. What recommendations for young people do you have without the backup? Do you recommend them hiring a manager? Well, when you're starting out, I had a couple of mentors tell me the best way to learn is you doing it yourself first, because you got to learn the business. You can't just hire somebody to do the business for me. Eventually, if you get to that point where you, as an artist, you've developed yourself to that point where you are able to do that, then okay, fine. But in the beginning, learn every part of the business. I mean, I'll be honest with you. For myself, I am the manager, I am the booker, I am the promoter, I am the musician, I'm the composer, I'm the person dealing with copyright and publishing. That because today, that's the world that we live in. You have to learn as much as you can so that you can have a handle on everything. Even right now during quarantine, my partner and I, we've been trying to figure out how to record ourselves, studio record in our house. Whereas 2 months ago, we just showed up, we were doing gigs. But now that's part of a requirement of being a musician. Being able to stream your educational workshops, being able to present professional quality recordings, not just a recording that comes from your audio app. No, how do you get a good sound on your instrument so that when the other person's listening to you, it's quality? So I would highly suggest learn as much as you can now. Ask questions, find mentors. Again, find mentors, find mentors, find mentors. They have information, they have resources, they can help guide you in knowing how to navigate the field and what stuff that you should look into, you know, reading or learning. And they'll help you so that when you do get to a place where you're ready to hire somebody, you know what they're supposed to do. So that if they're, in the case if they're not, you can make the appropriate decision. Or if they are, oh, okay, yeah, I got somebody good on my team. Because you want to make sure you have people on your team that support and believe in you. And the only way you're going to learn through your mentors and through experience. You don't want to spend tens and thousands of dollars and then figure out, oh, dang, that person didn't have my best interest and I could have did it myself. Yeah. Okay. I know that was a lot, but I want to take a second and ask if anybody has any questions. I'm gonna look on Facebook really quick because I'm sure there's some people with questions there. Let's see how this works. Ladies in Zoom, do you have any questions? I know I asked most of them, but.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, hello. I'm Zaria from Loyola in New Orleans.
Hey, Zaria.
So, my question is, as a sophomore in college, how would you suggest, like, what advice would you give me to help with the transition for after college? Is there anything I can do now, you think? Transition to like becoming a professional musician in like a big city.
Well, again, the first thing you want to do is have a network of people that you trust and you know that are like your mentors. You have somebody that's in that city that currently lives there that you know. Okay. They're going to be your family because they're going to help guide you through the circle. And you want to make sure that you have somebody that supports you, because the last thing you want to do is just say, okay, I'm here in New York City. And then it's crickets. You need support. Everybody needs support, especially when you're first starting out. So that's your first thing. The second thing, of course, practice as much as you can, because I guarantee you, honey, when you get to New York City or whatever city you get to, you're going to spend most of your time hustling to pay rent. That's just being honest. And the time that you have to practice and shed, you're going to really, really be savoring it. So right now, while you're in college, or even just in school in general, practice as much as you can. because it will get to a point where life will hit and you won't have time. So those are my 2 suggestions. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to look on Facebook really, really, really quick. Oh, man. Okay. It's not loading up. Do we have any other questions, ladies? Was there anything that was said that stuck out to you or you want to ask?
I have one, Camille.
Sure, go for it.
My name is Annette, and I'm from St. Thomas, but I live in North Carolina. And you talked about, getting mentors, but you meet these people and you talk to them, but how do you build a genuine relationship with them?
That's a good question. How do you build a relationship? Well, people are people. Start from there. See how they're doing. Just strike a conversation with them. Get to know what they like. I remember one of my mentors, he's not here with us. His name was Hammy Blewett. And I literally met him just walking in Harlem one day. And I saw him at Jenny's Supper Club, sitting and having a meal. And I introduced myself and we talked. And I really wanted to go and have a lesson with him. And he was an elder. So I called him up one time and he lived a couple of blocks from me. And I was like, hey, Mr. Blewett, I would love to come and just sit with you and talk. And he was like, yeah, sure. And I showed up and just sitting and talking with him ended up becoming a lesson. And then eventually it ended up being like our weekly hang where I would just go listen to him talk. And then he would wind up teaching me stuff about the saxophone. And then I ended up sometimes even making exchanges like, okay, if I made some dinner the night before, I'd create a little care package for him and bring it with me when I would go hang out with him. And he'd be like, oh, where's that salmon dinner you made? And I was like, here you go. And we'd start talking and turn into a lesson. But just, create a friendship, create a relationship. If there's something that you're really curious about, do your research and ask a good question. And you never know, they might open up to you. But I think the thing we have to remember with youth is that relationships, they go beyond, I don't have my phone here, they go beyond the phone of texting. They go beyond just showing up at a gig and saying hi. It's an active thing. So be active in getting to know that person. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. All right, we have a question on Facebook. How did I get perfect pitch? I'm sorry, that's something you're just born with. I mean, I've heard that there's ways of developing maybe some form of relative pitch. I don't know those materials personally. We could look into it, but that's all I know. I'm sorry. I was born with it. Okay. Another question, can you talk a little bit about returning to practice as an adult? What suggestions do you have for practice while keeping up with a full-time job? Well, just in general, anytime. We mentioned this in the beginning of the session. You want to make sure that you have an organized sense of time and schedule so that you can follow things and be able to do them completely. Give yourself a time, 2 hours, okay? I got 5 things I want to work on or 3 things I want to work on, and break it up and be consistent with it and follow through with it every day. That's all I can suggest. Yeah. Well, I think we ran out of time. Is everybody feeling good? I can't hear any.
Yes. Yes.
Y'all feeling good?
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going
I see Lynn has her hand up.
Thank you so much.
Somebody has a hand up. Whoa.
Lynn.
Sorry, I didn't even look at
Oh,
this.
no, that was from before I asked the question already, but thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm like trying to manage Facebook and Instagram. And I have to get an assistant.
It was great.
Good. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. I'm going to post a link to a form. If you could just take a few seconds and fill out, it's just a survey, see if you liked it, if you would want to do this again and whatnot. Just take the time to fill it out. Again, if you want to learn more about this, if I happen to do this again, or you want to find out, just follow me on Facebook or Instagram, or you can go to my website, www.camillethurmanmusic.com, and leave your email, and I'll let you know and see if we're going to do this again.
Will we be able to see this again, what was done today?
I'm going to leave this up on Facebook because
Okay, I didn't hear that part.
people on the other
Okay.
side of the world that are asleep right now that want to see it. So I'm going to leave it up for another day, but definitely fill out the survey so that way I can figure out if we should do this again. All right. I hope this was helpful.
It was
Again,
great.
thank you so much.
Even I took notes.
Ah! Thank you for coming. And if you got more questions out there, just think about them and email me, and we'll see what happens from here. Hopefully we can make this a regular thing. All right. Best of luck, ladies. Happy shedding and kick some behind. See you
Thank you,
soon.
Woo!
And I suggest everybody listen to Camille
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.